A low fire murmurs behind an iron grate, its breath thick with ash and roasted marrow. It is not a warm sound. It is the sound of something barely contained, smoke curling like a warning, embers watching like eyes that never close. Somewhere, in the black belly of the hearth, grease crackles, then pops, spitting like a trapped spirit trying to flee. A scullion girl flinches. She does not cry out. Her fingers are raw from scrubbing pewter bowls with sand and vinegar, and now they bleed into the threads of a split oat sack she patches with a bent bone needle. She is barefoot on the stone, because shoes are for those whose names are remembered. Her breath ghosts in the morning air. It is still before dawn, but the kitchen has not slept. It never does. There are other parts of this castle that sleep rooms behind tapestries, where noble children dream beside iron braziers, their cheeks flushed with wine and safety. There are chambers where monks light candles and murmur prayers. In dead languages, believing heaven listens. There is a chapel that smells of wax and sanctity. But here, in the cookhouse, everything shouts. Pots bang like weapons. Knives shriek against wet steam hisses up from the blood basin, and the spit boy mutters drunkenly in his sleep, curled too close to the ashes. He has burned off most of his lashes, but no one comments. Blood from the morning's lambs trickles across the flagstones, flowing toward the drain in a quiet red river. No one blocks it. No one stops it. Meat spoils faster in summer, so the butchers move quickly. The knife doesn't pause for your fingers. The cleaver does not remember you. To eat is to conquer death, and here death is always waiting. It lingers behind the barrels of salt pork. It crouches by the bread oven. It listens at the back of the pantry, where no one goes after dark. The kitchen is not a room. It is a battlefield between hunger and rot, between fire and famine, between the trembling hands of servants and the cold demands of lords who will never touch the floor. Above, there is laughter, there is feasting, there is music and goblets clinking beside linen-draped tables. But beneath that joy, beneath every stuffed goose and basted hare, there is this, the soot-slick face of a girl slicing onions in silence, her stomach growling louder than the stew-pot. The cook wipes sweat from his brow with the same cloth he uses to grip the pan. He doesn't notice the blood anymore. He remembers last winter when the stores ran dry before the thaw. He remembers the frostbite, the stew made of boiled bark, the half-rationed ale that didn't hide the hunger. He remembers what it is to be forgotten, and he does not forget. The bread must rise even if the firewood is damp. The pies must set even if the lard is crawling with weevils. The wine must be warmed even if there is plague, even if the rats have grown bold, even if someone went missing behind the grain bins. There are things no one asks. There is a door in the lower cellar that stays locked. Sometimes, late at night, a sound can be heard from behind it. A shuffle, a dragging chain, a cough, but no one investigates, no one speaks, because the kitchen cannot afford superstition. It barely affords survival. The bells ring for prime, morning prayers rise above, the castle stretches its limbs. But down here, in the half-light, a scream cuts through the fog of steam, a crash of iron, a blade dropped, a silence that chokes, the breath someone has slipped. No one saw who, no one saw where, but when the steam clears, there is blood, and the stew does not stop boiling. The ovens do not pause. Bread continues to rise as though nothing has happened. A tray is passed over. The fallen body. The girl at the hearth doesn't even look. She's seen worse. They all have. There is no room for mourning here. only repetition, only heat. The castle eats again at noon. It always does. And so the blood is mopped up with old flour sacks, the blade retrieved, the screams swallowed into memory. The scullion girl returns to her task, tying the oat sack with trembling hands. She has never tasted a full feast, but she has touched every part of it. She has sliced the apples for the tart. She has gutted the carp. She has peeled the lemons. She has caught the goose when it escaped its trussing. She knows the sounds food makes when it dies. She knows the names of the mice that live behind the brine barrels. She knows how to burn her fingers and not cry. And she knows this, that the kitchen will not stop for her. It will not pause if she breaks. It will keep turning like the spit, like the seasons, like the grinding millstone that takes grain and makes it flour, makes it bread, makes it holy, makes it gone. And still, in the shadows, something watches, not a person, not quite. Some say the kitchen has its own memory older than the castle itself, that every scream leaves a stain, that every burn leaves a voice, that the stones remember, and at night, when the fires die down to ember and ash, and even the rats curl up quiet in the corners, there is a breath, a low exhale from beneath the hearth, the sound of something still, waiting to be fed. Above, the bells will soon ring for terce. The nobles will want sweetmeats. The steward will ask why the pears are bruised. The priest will claim fasting while smearing his lips with honey, and the kitchen will rise again. The girl ties the oat sack and sets it upright. Her fingers tremble, but she does not weep. She stands, slowly, and moves toward the pot that needs stirring. She will not be remembered, but the castle eats because of her, because of hands like hers. And when the next feast comes, when the candles are lit and the music begins again, no one will taste the fear that boiled beneath the rosemary. No one will see the blood that slicked the floor, but it will be there, waiting. The second scream was never heard, not because it was quiet. It wasn't. It tore through the scullery like boiling oil on bare skin fass, shrill and uninvited. But the kitchen was loud that day. Pots clanged. A boar's leg fell to the floor with a sound like wet thunder. Someone dropped the salt, and, in the superstition of that moment, the others laughed, nervously, falsely, like laughter could break a curse. The scream folded into that noise, swallowed, forgotten. But the girl was not. Her name was Enid. She was no older than 15, with rope-burned wrists and a quiet mouth. A bastard niece of the laundress, taken in for pity or punishment. No one could say which. She moved like a shadow in the cookhouse, always where she shouldn't be, always just one step too close to the fire, or the wine casks, or the locked door behind the barley bins. That door, they told her not to touch it, not to look at it, not to sweep near it. It had no keyhole, only a rusted iron ring and a crack wide enough to fit a spoon handle through. Behind it silence, but Enid was curious, not foolish, just hungry in a different way, not for bread or stew, but for the answer to a question no one dared ask out loud. What was the kitchen feeding? Because it fed more than nobles, more than pigs and roosters and sweating cooks. It fed the stone beneath the floor, the thing behind the door. Some swore it was an old ice cellar, sealed after the last famine when children were traded for loaves. Others whispered of monks bricked up alive for heresy. One said it led to a tunnel, straight to hell or worse, to the armory vault where the Lord's secrets were buried with his first wife. No one knew, no one checked, because they knew what happened to the last boy who pried at the hinges. His apron was found near the hearth, burned through the middle. Nothing else remained. And now Enid was gone. The cook denied ever seeing her. The steward said her name wasn't on the ledger. The laundress wept into her wash bucket and said nothing at all. But Mouse, the barefoot girl from the SCULLERY dash, remembered. She remembered the moment Enid paused near the bard cellar. She remembered the way the light seemed to vanish behind her, as though the fire itself leaned away. She remembered hearing a sound after the scream, softer and worse than a scream like someone breathing through wet cloth. And she remembered, most of all, that no one ever went looking. By evening, the pots had been scrubbed clean, the bread had cooled, the meat had been carved and plated and carried to the feast. The fire roared like it had something to prove. The smell of roasted pears drifted upward through the corridors, past the chapel, past the Lord's Hall, past the windows where no one thought to look down. The kitchen had eaten, and now it slept. But that night, when even the coals burned low, and the knives were sheathed, and the rat traps reset, Mouse crept from her bedroll. The floor was cold beneath her feet. Her shift clung to her knees with sweat and ash dot. She lit no torch. She brought no one. There are some places light does not want to go, and the path to the door behind the barley bins is one of them. She stepped carefully, past the spice table, where old rosemary dried like brittle hair, past the butcher's block, where the cleaver still dripped from a late kill, past the ale cask that never emptied. The door was waiting, as though it had never been closed, as though it had always known she would return. She reached out. Her hand shook, but not from fear, from memory. She remembered Enid's voice, a hum, a question, a whisper about things not right in the grain sacks. She gripped the iron ring, cold, slick, too. Smooth for something so old. She pulled. Nothing moved. She pulled again, harder this time, and the door gave a sound like bone snapping beneath a boot. It opened 3 inches. No more, just enough to feel the cold seep out like breath. Just enough to see the dark. Not blackness, but colorless. Not absence, but presence. And then a sound dot from within, not a cry, not a word, a rustle, like fabric dragging across damp stone, like something turning over in its sleep. Mouse backed away. The door stayed open. She did not shut it. She could not. And when she turned, when she fled back to the hearth, back to the fading heat and the sleeping forms of the kitchen girls, she knew something had changed. Because behind her, the door sighed, not wood, not hinge, not even wind, a sigh, as if something inside was finally awake. By dawn, the ovens were lit. The butcher was cursing about a missing hook. The steward shouted about spoiled cream. The kitchen was alive again, but beneath the noise, beneath the rising of bread and the washing of knives and the soft murmur of coals catching light again, the open door breathed, and somewhere deeper than stone, beneath the marrow of the castle, something new began to stir. It was never just a kitchen. Long before the castle rose above it, before lords and linens, before bells and Latin hymns, this land was hollowed by hunger, a hollow that did not fill when the fields were ploughed, that did not mend when grain returned. They say there was a winter so long the ground split like glass, so cold that even the breath of prayer froze inside chapel walls, so empty that the castle did what castles were built to do, survive. And survival, in that age, meant sacrifice. Mouse did not know this. Not yet. but the stone did. And as she stepped near the door, again barefoot, sleepless, silent, she felt it. The pull, not of curiosity anymore, but memory, because some places remember, and this stone remembered everything the famine had. Come 300 winters ago, it took the horses first, then the dogs, then the birds. When snow buried the orchard, and wolves circled the outer walls, the Lord's steward gathered the servants. He spoke not of God, but of duty, of how the lords must endure, or none of them would. The lower cellars were emptied, the iron door was forged, the oaths were made in salt and smoke, and down they went, 7 children, 3 old women, 1 priest who had forgotten Latin and no longer prayed. They were led beneath the grain bins, given bread and broth and a single candle. Then the door was sealed, not locked, sealed, because locks are for those you intend to free. And as the winter deepened, the castle above slept a little easier. The stew returned to the pot. The lard stretched longer than it should have. The cellar door grew warm to the touch, and no one spoke of it again. But oaths like bones do not rot completely. Mouse had never heard the tale, but she had heard the silences, the gaps in stories, the names missing from ledgers, the cellar marked but never opened, and the dream. The night after she found the door ajar, she dreamed of a mouth behind stone open, waiting, full of ash. She woke with her throat dry, her hands clenched into fists. Someone had drawn a circle in soot beside her bedding. Not a warning, a welcome. The next morning, the cook cut himself 3 times, once on the cleaver, once on the spit, once on a spoon. He did not speak the rest of the day. The blood would not stop. That evening, Mouse followed the blood. Back to the door, back to the dark. This time she brought light, a stub of tallow candle hidden from the chapel, wrapped in an old rag. She opened the door. It groaned like lungs filling after a long sleep. The air that met her was wet and warm, not like the kitchen, not like the frost-touched corridors of the upper floors. It smelled sweet, like old fruit, like broth left too long in a sealed pot. The stairs spiraled, down and down. She held the candle before her, and shadows leaned in like children listening to a bedtime tale. The walls were slick, the stones hand-laid, no torch brackets, no markings, but at the bottom, a room dot round, low-ceilinged and silent. There was a table, stone, unmoved for centuries. A bowl atop it filled with dried something, not dust, not ash, something with shape. At the far end, a shape huddled in the corner, not moving, not breathing, not alive. She did not scream, because the shape wore an apron, not like the ones worn now, older, coarse, flax, stitched with a symbol 3 interlocked rings, faded to grey. Mouse stepped closer. The figure was bone, mostly, but the hands were bound with kitchen twine, not tied, woven, as if the hands had been made from thread, and meat and duty. Beside the shape was a broken ladle, blackened, bent, and a mark on the wall, carved, deep. Still I serve. She dropped the candle. Darkness swallowed everything in one breath. She ran. She does not remember the stairs or the door. Only the cold when she passed the kitchen hearth where no fire waited for her. She didn't sleep that night, nor did the cook. He sat awake, sharpening his cleaver over and over, whispering to the blade like it might forgive him. By dawn, 3 chickens had killed themselves in the yard. one by drowning in the cistern, one by breaking its neck against the gate, and one found gutted on the kitchen threshold, feathers laid in a ring round it. No one asked Mouse if she had gone below. No one dared, but they knew, because the air had changed, thicker, sweeter, like the promise of food after long starvation, and the door no longer closed. It stood open now, just a hand's breadth, but enough to remind them that the kitchen remembers, and the stones remember, and the old hunger has not yet been full. Some nights, when the fire is low and the coals shiver without wind, you can hear it, a spoon tapping against stone, rhythmic, polite, waiting. Mouse no longer tends the oats. She no longer scrubs the pewter or gathers the onions. She kneels by the hearth and listens to the door, because someone must, because someone always has. It is not a curse. It is a continuation. The kitchen survives because of her, because of all the girls before her, because of the ones who never left the cellar, because of the taste that never fades from the meat. The castle eats again at noon, and the fire stays hot, and the cook smiles too wide when the blood boils up in the stew. The hunger beneath is not gone, only patient, and now it knows her name. The steward did not sleep in the servants' hall. His room sat 3 stories above the kitchen hearth, across from the west tower stairs, in a narrow chamber with windows that never opened and a door that never locked. He kept the fire small, even in winter. He ate alone. He listened through the walls. His name was Owing. No one called him that any more. They called him Sir Ledger, because he remembered everything, and because what he wrote became truth, even when it wasn't, by the 3rd day. After the door opened, he began crossing out names. The parchment crackled under his pen. Mouse, cook's boy. To wash a girl's, the spit turner. Not gone, not dead, just erased. He dipped his quill in red ink. Only red. It had become a ritual by now, a superstition. Black ink cursed the numbers. Blue made the meat spoil. But red kept the cellar. Quiet, his hand shook only once. On the 5th name, he paused, wrote it anyway, then set the quill down and drank from a goblet of warmed milk. No one knew how long he'd served this castle. Some said 40 years. Others claimed he had come with the stones. All agreed on one thing. He had never left, not once. He was not afraid of the dark, because he had lit the first candle in it, in his chamber. Beneath the ledgers and parchment, behind the locked cabinet, there was another book, bound in waxed leather, stitched with coarse linen, unmarked on the spine dot inside it. A list, 1 name, per page, each followed by a short phrase. Carried broth before the first frost. Cut onions without weeping. Held the cleaver too long. Heard the knocking but did not look away. And beneath each, a tally mark, in sets of 5, 20 pages. 100 names. Not all had died, but all had entered the kitchen, and all had seen the door OE enclosed the book. The fire in his hearth guttered. He did not relight it. Instead, he stood and opened the drawer beside the bed. Inside, a spoon carved from bone, the handle etched with 3 rings. He placed it in his pocket. Downstairs, the cook hummed a song no one taught him. The scullery was empty. Mouse's bedroll remained untouched. Still, the bread was rising. Still, the fire burned, and the cellar. Door stayed open just enough for a breeze to move through the cookhouse like breath. Owing descended the stairs slowly. Each one creaked in a particular tone. He knew them all. The fifth from the bottom sang a little. The seventh wept in the corridor behind the kitchen. He passed the barley bins. No one looked at him. The butcher bowed his head. The undercook turned away. They all knew what it meant when the steward came down himself. It meant the ledgers no longer lied. It meant the kitchen had spoken. He stood before the door, felt the heat rolling out, though no fire burned below. He reached for the ring and stopped. Something had been left there, a scrap of linen, stained not with blood, but with ink. He bent down, lifted it. A name was written on the fabric, his own dot, not in his hand, not in his ink, but unmistakable. The door opened without sound. He did not flinch. He had opened it before, long ago, during the second famine, when the barley rotted in the silo and the spring melt brought worms instead of wheat. He had offered names then, and fingers, and his voice. That is why he no longer shouted. That is why he wrote. Below, the cellar was warm, sweeter now. The bowl on the stone table had been emptied, and in its place a plate. Upon it, a crust of bread, still warm. He stepped forward, took the spoon from his pocket. He did not eat. That was not his role. He laid the spoon beside the plate, kneeled, spoke 5 words into the dark. The castle remembers. I serve. A breath passed over his face. Soft, like a child exhaling. He stood, turned, climbed the stairs. The cellar did not close behind him. It never had to. By morning, new names had arrived in the kitchen. 3 girls from the sheepfold, a boy with crooked teeth, a mute girl from the infirmary who stirred stew better than any trained hand. They were not told of the cellar, only of the heat, the cuts, the unspoken rules. Owen sat at his desk, opened his ledger, dipped the quill, wrote their names in black ink, paused, then reached for the red, because he had seen the mark on the wall. Down in the cellar, a new one, scratched beside the old. Still I serve, but not alone. He did not speak, but he understood. The hunger beneath was growing. It remembered warmth, it remembered names, and now it remembered choice. They came at dawn, 3 children and a priest. The cart creaked into the yard while the mists still clung to the chapel eaves, and frost cracked in the corners of the stone. A steward from the northern holdings handed over a scroll and left without blessing or word. His horse kicked at the gate and did not look back. The children were young, unremarkable, 2 girls, 1 boy, blank-eyed, cloaked in wool too thin for the season, but one among them did not blink when she saw the kitchen smoke. She did not flinch at the butcher's hook or the hiss of lard hitting flame. She simply listened. They gave her no name. She did not offer one. Some thought her slow. Others said she was born without a tongue, though no one had ever checked. But it was not silence that made her strange. It was her stillness. When others hurried, she paused. When they winced at the boiling fat or wept while gutting trout, she stood calm, sleeves rolled, hands red, breath even. She did not avoid the cellar door. She knelt beside it at night, her fingers pressed to the stones, her eyes closed, not in prayer, in listening, and the door listened back. She could hear things the others could not. The clatter of old spoons echoing through stone, the shuffle of feet never seen, the exhale of something that had not breathed in generations. She did not fear it. She answered it in rhythm, in touch, in breath. One morning the bread was burnt, not black, but wrong dense and bitter. The cook cursed, tossed the batch into the coals, and spat blood. His gums had begun to rot. The mute girl stepped forward. She pointed to the flour, then to the cellar. The cook stared at her, then at the steward's ledger. No words were spoken, but something passed between them that night. She took a sack of grain and disappeared. She was gone for 3 hours. When she returned, she carried nothing. But the dough rose perfect the next day. No one asked what she had given or what she had learned. The other children grew pale. The boys stopped speaking. One girl bit her fingers raw and was sent to the infirmary. Only the mute girl thrived. She stirred stew without instruction, knew when the blood was too dark, could feel when meat had spoiled before the flies came, and she began leaving offerings, not food, but signs. A spoon left upright in cold water, 3 sprigs of thyme bound in waxed twine, a sliver of bone carved, with lines that no one taught her. She set them by the cellar door every night. The door never opened, but the kitchen grew warmer, and the fire never failed. Owen watched her from the stairs. He marked her name in red, but he did not strike it. Through dot, not yet, because something was changing. The hunger below, no longer called, it waited, and she answered, not as offering, not as sacrifice, but as companion. The cook's rot stopped spreading. The stew no longer clotted overnight. Even the mice returned to their nests. But the girl grew quieter. She no longer smiled. Her fingers moved in patterns on wood, on skin, in flour dust on the table, as if remembering something older than language. The others began to fear her, not for what she did, but for what she did not need. She needed no praise, no sleep, no warmth, only rhythm, only silence. She walked the kitchen like a ghost learning how to be flesh, and at night, when the wind howled down the hearth and the lanterns sputtered with no breeze, the cellar would creak, and she would hum, not a tune, just sound, low and circular. The kind of sound a bone makes when boiled too long. Owen wrote this in his private ledger, dated it, marked it with a black feather. Then he turned to the final page. Blank, waiting, no more names to strike, no more children to send, just one girl who now slept beside the hearth, not on straw, but on stone, by choice. One night, the fire did not light. The cook's flint snapped in half. The logs were dry. The oil was fresh, but nothing caught until the mute girl rose from her corner, touched the iron grate, and whispered without sound. The fire bloomed like breath, and for the first time the kitchen fell silent. Even the cleavers stilled, because they knew she was no longer a servant. She was the rhythm. She had become the breath of the room, the warmth of the flame, the voice of the door, and no one could name her, because she had always been there, waiting to be remembered, like hunger, like flame, like stone. She waited until the bread had risen, not just risen, listened. The dough sat on the board like a held breath, its skin dimpled, its warmth precise, not too much, not too little, alive in the way certain things are when no one is watching. She touched it once, a palm pressed lightly over flour. Then she turned from the kitchen. No one stopped her. Even the steward, quill in hand, kept his head low as she passed. He heard the hush in her footsteps, the stillness they carried with them. Like fog, like remembrance, she stepped barefoot across the cold flagstone, past the barley bins, past the cracked cistern where 3 chickens had drowned last month, past the cleaver hooks and gutting boards, and the place where Enid had screamed, The cellar door waited. It had never shut again, not fully. It didn't need to. It breathed now, and she breathed with it. The iron ring fit her hand, as though carved for her long ago. She pulled, no sound, just a rush of air, like lungs filling after silence. She descended. The stone stairs held a warmth that had never come from fire. It curled through the soles of her feet like memory, not hers, not fully, but familiar. The rhythm of 100 steps taken before dot down, 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 down dot until the air changed. No rot, no mold, but something sweeter, like marrow steamed in bone, like sugar melted too long, like breath against stone. The chamber was waiting, not dark. It glowed faintly, from the walls, from the bowl on the stone table, now filled not with blood, not with meat, but water, clear, unmoving, holding a single black feather that never sank. She crossed the threshold and felt it, the hush, not silence, recognition. The cellar knew her, and not as prey, not as offering, but as part. She knelt before the bowl, touched the feather. It trembled, then stilled. Across the room, shapes stood where shadows should be. 7 of them, human once. Not now, not fully. They were not ghosts, they were not flesh. They were witness. Each held a tool, a ladle, a spoon, a skinning knife, a broken pestle, a sprig of rosemary bound with old thread, a torn apron, and the last, a ledger, blank, its ink still wet. They did not speak, they did not move, but they waited. The girl reached into her apron, removed a crust of bread, a sliver of fat, a twist of salt. She placed them in the bowl beside the feather. The water rippled once, the feather turned, and the cellar exhaled above. The kitchen hearth flared, the spit turned on its own, and the oven door, long rusted shut, fell open in the steward's chamber. The ink in the ledger spread across the page, blurring every name. Owen did not cry, but he closed the book. He understood. The kitchen no longer needed names. It needed only memory, and memory had chosen her. Below, the girl stood. The 7 figures stepped back, their shapes fading into the stone. Not as disappearance, but as return. She was alone again, but not truly, because the rhythm remained, the hum beneath her feet, the breath on her neck, the warmth in her hands. She reached to the wall, drew 3 circles in soot, and beneath them a line, the old mark, still I serve. But she added more, a single word, willing. Then she turned, climbed the stairs. The air behind her held. The feather floated still. The door remained open, but the hunger no longer growled. It no longer begged. It watched, and she smiled. The kitchen was waiting for her when she returned, but no one moved. They watched her walk, watched her stir the stew, watched her kneel beside the fire and press her hand against the stones, and they listened for the first time. They all listened to the rhythm, to the hush, to the breath beneath the fire. The cook dropped his ladle. It did not clatter. The steward tore the name page from the ledger. It turned to ash before it hit the ground. No one spoke. The bread rose. The fire burned, and she stood, hands folded, eyes closed, not asleep, not working, just being. She had become the kitchen, not its master, not its servant, but its witness, the kind the cellar had always waited for. And in her silence, the castle breathed, the final chapter. We rise into the great hall above the kitchen for a noble feast, a mirrored world of firelight, wine, and laughter, but the silence beneath, and the mute girl now tethered to the cellar's breath, completes the truth. The castle survives on rhythm and memory, not flesh. What was once sacrifice is now legacy, and the kitchen's fire burns not from hunger, but from those who remember. Above the kitchen, the great hall blazed. Candles dripped wax into gold. Wine shimmered in goblets carved with vines. Boar smoked on silvered trays, while laughter bounced off the banners of dead men. The Lord wore red, not for war, but for celebration. His daughter was betrothed. His enemies were starving beyond the hills. The castle had never felt more alive. Flames danced in the hearth as if drunk. The smell of honeyed pears, of roasted marrow and thick stew clung to the air like perfume. And in every dish was a rhythm. They did not taste it, not truly, but the fire in their bellies came from something deeper than spice, something older than salt. It came from below. In the kitchen, the mute girl stirred her ladle once, not out of duty, not out of hunger, but because the fire asked her to. She no longer followed orders. She no longer belonged to the cook or the steward or the castle's ledgers. She belonged to the breath between stones, to the warmth that flickered in silence. She did not speak, but her presence stilled the room. The cook no longer cursed. He hummed a strange tune, low pulsing, like a heartbeat heard from under thick cloth. The spit boy walked differently now. He turned the roast as if turning a wheel of time, each motion slow and measured, his burned palms wrapped in new linen, stitched with 3 small circles, and owing the steward. He had not left his chamber since the girl's descent. The ink in his ledger had faded entirely, every name gone, even his own. He now wrote only one word, over and over, on loose parchment. Still, and then, beneath it, smaller, remember, at the feast, no one noticed when the wine never ran dry. No one questioned why the apples had not spoiled despite the frost. No one asked why the bread rose perfectly despite the new girl never speaking, because some blessings are easier left unnamed. The Lord raised a toast. He thanked the gods, the harvest, the steel of his guards, but not the kitchen, never the kitchen. The kitchen needed no thanks. Its fire burned for memory, not glory. Its smoke rose for the nameless, not the crowned dot. And beneath that hall, beneath all the boots and songs and banners, the cellar pulsed, not with hunger, but with presence. The door remained open, just a sliver, the feather in the bowl still. Floated the figures, the witnesses did not return because they were no longer needed. The girl had remembered for them, and remembrance is a kind of offering. Each time the stew stirred clockwise, each time the rosemary was bound with red twine, each time a blade was cleaned before it bled, a name returned, not spoken, but known. The child traded for barley, the woman who tended fire until her lungs turned black, the butcher who never flinched, even as his own fingers slipped, the boy who sang to the pigs so they wouldn't panic, the girl who touched the door and smiled. They were still here in the warmth, in the bread, in the rhythm they had never truly left. And the mute girl, the witness, was only the newest vessel, not the first, not the last, but the most willing. She did not eat from the feast. She drank only warm water, cupped in a clay bowl, chipped. At the rim, she sat on the floor, beside the hearth, her knees tucked beneath her, her palms turned upward, listening to the fire, to the cellar, to the castle itself, which now pulsed with something more than stone and debt and law. It pulsed with knowing, and in that knowing there was peace, not safety, but peace, because they would still come, the lords, the scribes, the cooks, the boys with crooked hands and girls with hollow eyes. The castle would still feed, the bread would still rise. But now it would do so in rhythm, not from fear, not from sacrifice, but from witness. The kitchen had become sacred. Not holy, there were no saints here, but sacred, bound by memory, fed by silence, held by the breath of those long dead who had never been named, but had never been forgotten. In the great hall, the Lord's daughter laughed. She would marry in spring. She would never enter the kitchen, but in her dowry would be honey cakes that never spoiled, and linens that never stained. And in her belly the fire would burn, a small warmth carried with her down generations, from a cellar, from a girl, from a rhythm kept alive when the world would have rather forgotten. The mute girl stood. She walked to the kitchen door, opened it. The air outside was crisp, dark, still. She stepped into it, not to leave, but to offer the fire's breath back to the world. She whispered without sound, and the wind changed. Somewhere in the hills, a starving family lit their last candle. It flared stronger than expected. They did not question it. Somewhere far from the castle, a small villager's oven caught warmth before flint was struck. A woman wept as her bread rose. They did not know her name or her silence, but they felt it, because memory travels through heat, through rhythm, through stone. And the cellar was never only one place. It was a way of remembering, of feeding without devouring, of holding without binding. The kitchen, once feared, had become a heart, beating slow, burning steady, listening always, and somewhere behind every feast, behind every prayer over bread, the breath of the fire continues to hum. Still I serve, but now, for the first time in centuries, it is answered, and I remember, far from the castle walls, where frost clings to the thatch and the river splits the hills like a dark seam, a woman sings. Her voice is low, worn from winter air and smoke. She sings not for performance, not for joy, but to carry time forward, to hold it in the breath between verses. A child listens, curled by the hearth, his face lit by fire and the flicker of her rhythm. The words do not rhyme. They are not in Latin, nor any tongue written down. They are older, built from sound, built from need, built from memory. One girl stirs, and 7 rest. The fire fed, the hunger blessed. Bread shall rise, and mouth shall close, but still beneath, the memory grows. The child does not understand the meaning, but he feels it. He always has. Whenever the stew tastes richer than it should, whenever the frost spares the hearthwood, whenever the chickens lay late into winter, there is something beneath. The villagers don't speak of the castle often. It stands like a shadow against the northern sky, not cursed, not worshipped, simply there. Some say it's hollow. Others say it feeds, but all of them know when their grain spoils in spring but the porridge still thickens, when their candles burn longer than the wax should allow, when a child survives a fever with no herbs at hand, it is because of the fire. Not the sun, not the gods, but the fire beneath the kitchens, a rhythm passed from breath to bowl, from silence to song. No one remembers when the mute girl's tale first became a story. It's never told the same way twice. Some say she had no mouth and never aged. Some say she was born in the hearth and melted back into it. Others say she married a lord and still walks the upper halls, hands warm and eyes hollow, watching every flame for a change in the rhythm. But those who remember truly, the old women, with hands shaped like bread loaves, the men who sharpened blades slower than their fathers did, they know she didn't vanish, she spread. Because now every kitchen is a kind of cellar, every stew a kind of offering, every silence before a meal a kind of remembering. There are signs. A spoon turned the wrong way on a table, a feather floating in washwater, 3 circles, drawn in soot above a fireplace, names forgotten in ledgers but whispered into rising dough. The village has no steward, no ledgers, no red ink, but they know who came before. They remember the girl with the crooked hand who stirred the pot with song, the boy who salted bread like he'd seen someone do it in a dream, the midwife who lit fires with no flint when the wind turned. Against her, each one a spark, each one part of the rhythm. The woman finishes her song. She does not look at the child. She stares into the fire. Its shape shifts. For a moment, a flicker, it becomes something more. Not a figure, not a face, just the suggestion of presence, a breath, a memory that the child does not speak. He takes a piece of bread from the table, crumbles it, and places it into the fire. Not taught, just known. Outside, snow begins to fall, but the roof stays dry. The chickens cluck softly in their coop. The cow lies down without pain. The baby in the cradle does not wake. And far above the hills, the castle exhales. The cellar door has not opened in years. It does not need to. The fire has spread. It burns in the low houses, in the wandering kitchens, in the blackened pots and cracked bowls and calloused hands. It burns where it is remembered, and that is enough. Owing's ledger, long buried beneath the steward's desk, rotted into dust. Its pages now mulch for ivy climbing the castle wall. The mute girl's apron hangs above the hearth in the old kitchen. No one touches it, but sometimes it sways when there is no wind. The stone table below still stands. The bowl still rests. At its center, the feather still floats. The water never ripples. Some say she returns in winter, sits by the bowl and listens. Not as servant, not as saint, but as witness, the one who remembered, the one who stirred, the one who burned, not from fire, but from keeping the rhythm whole. The fire is not hungry now. It is held, and we, above it all, warm our hands without knowing why. We thank no one, but we feel the hush in the air just before the bread is broken. We pause only for a moment, and that pause is everything. The castle still stands. The cellar still breathes, but the rhythm lives in us, in silence, in flame, in memory, and whenever a meal is shared without cruelty, whenever warmth is passed, hand to hand without name or debt. The fire hums again, still I serve, and somewhere someone whispers in reply, and I remember, there is no last fire, only the breath between them, no final ember, no extinguished hearth, only the waiting, the moment between one life's warmth and another's memory. The cellar lies quiet now. The bowl still holds its water. The feather never sank. And no one has spoken the mute girl's name in years, not because she is forgotten, but because to speak her name would be to interrupt the rhythm, and the rhythm must continue, even without song, even without voice, even without those who once stirred the pot. The castle stands still, not abandoned, not ruined, simply done. Its walls hold the heat of thousands of fires. Its stone halls remember footsteps. Its kitchen remembers hands, not with grief, but with pattern. The scullery now holds no buckets, no bones, no shouting boys or steaming pots. But if you press your ear to the flagstones, you might hear something. The low hum of memory, the echo of water being poured, the scrape of a spoon across a pot that no longer hangs. In a world where ledgers lie and lords forget, the fire remembers, and the fire does not judge. It only asks to be kept, fed with care, watched with love, tended in silence. This is what the girl gave Dot, not her body, not her name, but her witness. And in doing so, she became the last servant whose silence saved the rhythm. Because in every century that followed, a kitchen somewhere kept to her rituals. In a monastery in the northern hills, a monk stirs broth in silence, 3 times clockwise, once counter. He does not know why. Only that the stew heals Dot in a hut by the sea. A widow buries salt beneath her hearth each winter. She was never told to. Only that the storms never take her roof. In a crumbling village, a child draws 3 soot circles above the fire and speaks. No words for 1 full day. And when his brother wakes from fever, the boy only nods. They do not know the cellar. They do not know the girl. But the rhythm knows them, and the fire welcomes them. It is not holy. There are no saints here, no miracles, only continuity. A fire lit, a spoon turned, a silence kept, long after the castle's stone crumbles into moss, long after the stew pots rust into soil, long after the ledgers dissolve. Into dust the rhythm remains, not written, not declared, but held by hands that do not seek recognition, by mouths that speak only when needed, by hearts that listen to flame like it is breath. This is the true safety, not the stone walls, not the sword at the gate, but the cellar that never demanded, only waited and was answered once, by a girl with no name, and now, by all of us. Every act of care, every quiet stirring, every meal prepared in memory, every warmth shared without reason, is the cellar, living again not beneath stone, but beneath the skin. It is not history, it is inheritance. And though the castle has no voice left to speak, its silence still instructs. The fire must be tended, the rhythm must be kept, the cellar must not be feared. For it is not death, it is the stillness that remembers. The steward's ink may fade, the names may be lost, but the feather still floats, and the fire, wherever it burns quietly, burns for her, and for all who came before her, those without songs or titles, without tombs or tapestries, the ones who served not by command, but by instinct, who loved the flame not for glory, but because it was warm. In that warmth lives a story, one never told aloud, but kept in a kitchen, in a bowl, in a breath, in a hush before the first meal is shared. The cellar door is open, it always has been, not to trap, but to receive, not to take, but to hold. And in every quiet room where someone feeds another with care, the fire hums its old hymn again, still I serve. And always, always someone answers.